11.1 homework number 2, video number 2. And these are the examples that we are going to do for this, continue doing for this homework. These particular problems, well, number 3 and number 4, we're going to look at some opposite factors and how to do those. So, first, let's go back to what we did in 11.1 homework number 1, at where we factor when we have a binomial in the numerator or in the denominator. So in this particular numerator, I can factor out an 8, and I get m minus 9. Now, notice that m minus 9 in the numerator and 9 minus m in the denominator are opposites, because the m's, the top m and the bottom m are opposites, and the 9 and the negative 9 and the positive 9, those are opposites. So what we're going to do is take the denominator, and I'm going to factor out negative 1. So when I factor out negative 1, remember that means I'm dividing both terms by negative 1. And so that's negative 9 plus m. Now I'm going to switch these two around. And now they look the same. And so now I can cancel out the m minus 9's. So I have 8 over negative 1, which reduces to negative 8. So the simplified form of this particular rational expression is negative 8. Now we're still looking at excluded values. So go back to where the, it doesn't matter, you can go back to either this denominator, or you can start at this denominator where I canceled, and I'm going to take that denominator, not the negative 1, because negative 1 doesn't have a variable as part of its expression, but m minus 9 does. So I'm going to set it equal to 0 and then solve. So the excluded value for m is positive 9. Okay. All right, number 4, another one where we're going to look at some opposite factors. First, I'm going to take the numerator and factor out the greatest common factor, which is 4. The denominator, I'm going to factor that. This is a binomial, but doesn't have a greatest common factor. Instead, it's a difference of 2 squares. 4 is a perfect square, t squared is a perfect square because it has an even exponent, and we have a minus sign. So this is 2 minus t, 2 plus t. I know I don't like pluses and t's in there at the same time either. All right, so notice we have opposite factors. T minus 2 on top and 2 minus t on bottom. Those are opposite factors. So I'm going to take the 2 minus t, and I'm going to factor out negative 1. So divide by negative 1, and I get negative 2 plus t. Still have the 2 plus t. Now I'm going to switch around the negative 2 plus t so that it looks at this, t minus 2. Now I didn't switch around the 2 plus t, but you can if you want to. I'm going to show you 2 different ways you can write that answer in just a moment. All right, so now the t minus 2 on top and the t minus 2 on bottom both cancel out. So this negative 1 right here, actually we can put it in 2 different places. We can either multiply it by the 4 on top, or we can make it a negative in front of the fraction. Okay, either way will work. The program will take either answer. So this answer can be negative 4 over 2 plus t, or you can rearrange it to negative 4 over t plus 2. Again, t plus 2 is not an opposite of 2 plus t. It's just the commutative property. All right, so now let's look at excluded values. Now when we do excluded values, I usually like to go, and if you noticed, where they right before or right whenever I started to cancel. So there's where I started to cancel. So I'm going to take each factor before I canceled. I'm going to write it as t plus 2. Set it equal to 0, set each factor equal to 0, and solve. Now again, don't worry with the negative 1 because it doesn't have a variable. We're just looking at the exclusions for expressions that have variables. So my two exclusions are -2 and +2. All right, so that's what opposite factors look like and how to simplify whenever you have opposite factors. All right, so here's a word problem for you dealing with a rectangular prism and its volume. First, it says the length of a rectangular prism is 1 more than 3 times the width W. So I have length and I have width. Alright, so I noticed that my volume has a W, so I'm going to deal with the W as my variable. So the width, and it does say width W right here too, so that helps me. Alright, so the width is W. The length is 3 times the width plus 1. Alright, so that's first. Second, the volume of a prism is 3W cubed plus 13W squared plus 4W. What is the simplified expression for the height of the prism? So first, let me remind you that volume is length times width times height. Now, since I am looking for height, I'm going to solve this expression for h. So I'm just going to rewrite it so that it's volume over length times width equals the height. Now I'm going to use this expression for my third step to find what the height is. Alright, so they tell us that volume is 3W cubed plus 13W squared plus 4W. Over, we know that the length and the width are these two. Now since width is a monomial, I'm going to write it first and then put the length in parentheses. Now, I've already got the denominator factor, so don't do the multiplication. Don't do the distributive property there. I now need to factor this numerator. So first, I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor, which is W. As you can see, the W's right there are going to cancel, but I'm going to continue factoring. Now, this trinomial right here is one of those ultimate guess and check type problems that it factors into 3W plus 1, W plus 4. Okay, so remember the guess and check kind, make sure that you use FOIL to check. Now I can cancel. This W cancels this W. 3W plus 1 cancels 3W plus 1 from the bottom. And so all that I'm left with is W plus 4, which is the height. Okay, so there was about 3 to 4 steps there. Fourth step was to factor. Okay. All right. Last one. Whoops. Number 6. Another one. We have 2 trinomials, one on top, one on bottom, and we need to do the guess and check. So this factors into 3t plus 1, t minus 2. The numerator factors into 2t plus 1, t minus 2. Now, again, at this point, if you want to go ahead and do the exclusions, you can. The denominators, the factor denominator is 2t plus 1 and t minus 2. Set those equal to 0 and solve each for t. So I have -1/2 as one exclusion and +2 as the other exclusion. Sometimes it helps to go ahead and find the exclusions before you actually start canceling. T minus 2's cancel, so I'm left with 3t plus 1 in the numerator, 2t plus 1 in the denominator. So the simplified form is 3t plus 1 over 2t plus 1, and the exclusions are -1/2 and +2. All right, now you're ready to do homework number 2.